I don't suspect that Bookchin was against storytelling. I don't think that he would be like, oh, Star Wars is a distraction from the revolution. He might say,
lists only, no stories about why you're voting for Obama.
I want a list of the characters from Star Wars and what their motivations are, and that's good. I think he was very specifically, he would be critical of the idea that watching Star Wars and criticizing Star Wars through a political or, feminist lens or whatever in itself is a political revolution. He was very dedicated to this notion that we have to actually get serious about politics. We have to get serious about the type of world that we want to see. And so I think understanding his opposition to myth, or his invocations of myth as like primordial old myths to criticize the present, saying that we're regressing from these higher forms of reason. He wasn't saying, oh, J.R.R. Tolkien shouldn't have invented a mythological universe to tell stories in. But he might say, if J.R.R. Tolkien did that specifically because he wanted to transition from this mode of society to a higher mode of society, yes, I'm critical of that. That's useless towards our ends.
Yeah. I think what he's being critical of is in pre-Enlightenment times, before science, before, philosophy got this reboot and people started really thinking deeply about a lot of different things. In the past, people, when they were building their myths, because myth building is something that we do, it's part of how our brain works, it's how we understand the world. When they were doing that, they didn't have access to science at all. So they were just making shit up and telling these stories, and a lot of the time actually believing that they were true, creating these ideologies, religions around them, and punishing people and enforcing them and going to war over them. And I think that's the kind of stuff that he's against, not the actual fact of storytelling on a mass scale in order to orient people, which I think is a good thing. And Bookchin also thinks is a good thing because it's what he's doing in his in his work a lot of the time.
You mentioned the is-ought distinction. And here's a quote from Bookchin about that. Quote, "We're even witnessing a revival of Hume's is-ought criticism, which denies speculative thought the right to reason from the what is to the what should be. This positivistic mousetrap is a problem not in logic, but in ethics. Notably, the right of the ethical should be to enjoy an objective status. To remain within the what is in the name of logical consistency is to deny reason the right to assert goals, values, and social relationships that provide a voice to the claims of ecology as a social discipline." So basically he said is-ought, and I don't really care about that. It doesn't make any sense to me.
Right. Yeah. When I was just saying, because is-ought, this is why, he wants to collapse my idea of mythology into reason. I think that's what it sounds like from what you're reading out there.
Yeah. And he had this idea of objective ethics that were drawn from nature, which I've seen criticized by a lot of people. And I think I get what he's getting at, which is that, there's more or less objective things we want to try to find. Basically, we want to find the mythological structure in narrative that is closest to reflecting what we know of reality, which seems to be also exactly what you're saying.
Yeah. Or at least be aware when our myths are just Star Wars like stories, and be aware when we're trying to tell a myth that matches the world around us. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I agree with Bookchin that there's a real danger in having myths that are completely detached from reality.
Myths in place of the scientific method. And
yeah, just I don't think science can replace myths, because I think they serve two different functions. I definitely don't think myths can replace science.
Yeah, no, Star Wars is a really, really poor map of the table of elements.
Yeah, and it's also a poor map of how things sound in space, or don't sound like anything in space, and multiple other incorrect science things.